Hello and welcome back to my astrology ramblings once again. So I'm sorry if there's a bit of noise in this video just because of my laptop fan. I'm recording this on my laptop and it's making a little bit of noise, so I hope that doesn't come through too much. I feel like there's always something in my videos. I made a video a while ago, it's the latest video on my channel, about some of the things that I most like about astrology. And I knew that I wanted to make a follow-up video about some of the things that I don't like so much about astrology, because I think I wanted to be a bit transparent about some of the things that are maybe more challenging, and maybe it might be relatable for some people who are also, learning astrology or doing astrology in some way, and it might create a bit of, discussion or whatever. So one of the things, I have written some notes here, so if I'm looking here to the side, I'm looking at my phone. So one of the things is that depending on the content that you consume or the kind of astrology that you look at, there are some sources or types of astrology that can be quite vague and therefore a little bit more difficult to fully connect to and relate to. So I think that is something that is so difficult to get right about astrology, is to have it be practical enough, detailed enough, and just relatable enough for your life circumstances, let's say, because there's a lot of astrology out there, such as, there's certain pop astrology and like astrology from magazines, like, daily horoscopes in magazines and things like that, that don't really get to the essence, or don't really get to the depths of what astrology really is capable of shining a light on. So it doesn't quite shine a light on things as much as, there might be something to it, but it doesn't shine a light quite as much as the more like in-depth astrology, or astrology that kind of gets to the essence of what is it trying to tell us and how can it resonate. So there is astrology out there that is quite vague, and it is difficult to get into that headspace myself sometimes of trying to do astrology and trying to do it in a way that is in-depth enough, and it doesn't just skim the surface or something. And sometimes it is the case that I will have certain insights or ideas in my head that I do find it difficult to, let's say, express verbally, or express in a way that would be as true as possible or as relatable as possible, because there are so many different ideas that I would have about astrology, but talking is something that is difficult sometimes to connect to the vastness of astrology, right? So it's difficult to kind of push the ocean through a straw sometimes. So I think you do have to be careful with astrology, and this isn't astrology's fault. It's not necessarily something that is just bad about astrology, but there's just certain types of astrology or certain content out there that is more vague, and it's difficult to kind of fine-tune yourself to it, so to understand it in a way that is relatable, if that makes any sense. Kind of difficult to word this, but hopefully you understand what I mean. It's just like, that's just one of the things about astrology that can be more challenging, is to find the correct type of astrology that works for you and that you resonate with, and you have to be kind of careful with that. This goes to my different point now. It's kind of connected. So, the information in some of these vague astrological sources, let's say, can be kind of manipulated easily, or they can be kind of impractical. There's an element of illusion to it, right? So you might start to kind of superficially assign certain meanings to certain things or certain characteristics that are not really what the astrology is trying to tell you. You might think, oh, that person is an Aries, so he's going to act like this. But really, the Aries sun in that person might be expressed in something. It's actually trying to tell you it's something else. If that makes any sense. It's difficult to word it, but there is an element of illusion to astrology, and that's why you have to kind of have your wits about you when you are studying it or doing it in any way. you kind of have to have your wits about you, in that you have to, let's say, find sources, find information, and find your own insights that are actually relevant, and that you see and you feel very strongly that it is actually relevant to the situation, or your life, or whatever it is, or the, situations in the world or something. You kind of have to make the correlation, and that can be challenging. And especially if you're just learning astrology and you're kind of in your early stages of learning astrology, it can be difficult to get in touch intuitively to that in that level, if that makes any sense. So you have to be smart about it, and you have to have your wits about you, in the sense that, like, you have to just the intuition has to tell you things that you can see practically, realistically, that actually it does correlate in some way, and that can be difficult. It can be difficult to get to that level. Another thing that I don't like about, let's say, and again, it's not the astrologer's fault, but one of the things that I don't like about, let's say, being interested in astrology, or learning astrology, or doing astrology, is that it isn't really widely accepted, around me at least. So it's not something that I can kind of talk about in person, except with like specific people. It's something that, if I told some people, let's say if I was doing it more seriously as a career, if I told some people that, hey, I'm an astrologer, or if they asked me like, what do you do? And I'm like, oh, I'm an astrologer, they would find it maybe a little bit off-putting, or they would find it like, oh, you're doing this woo-woo thing, or this vague thing. And so that's another reason why it is important to do astrology in a way that is not vague, and that in a way that it is not just woo-woo, and that it is actually helping people, or it is helping people see correlations, or like patterns, or like the meanings of certain things in their lives, and give context to certain things. So I don't like, in a way, that I'm kind of interested and involved with something that a lot of people just dismiss, and that is not anybody's fault, really. It's just the fact that astrology is so, it's still sort of, it's just not widely accepted everywhere, right? So it's like, when you see certain patterns or correlations in an astrology, like in terms of astrological language, it can make you feel like an outsider, or a misfit in some way, because you're interested in something that you kind of see correlations and patterns, but then when other people, let's say, dismiss it, on one hand, it can also make me, that the fact that they dismiss it can also make me wonder, well, maybe this is all woo-woo, and maybe this is all sort of just nonsense, or, there's certain times in my life where that has been the case, where I've kind of started to think, well, is this really helping me, or is this really relevant? And that's maybe, again, if I'm not really fully connected to the intuition in a way that is actually showing me things in a realistic, practical way. So that's why you have to tune into it in a way that you see that, yes, actually, this is relevant, and this is actually true in a certain sense. And if you're applying it in a way that makes sense, and if you're understanding it in a way that makes sense. But if you're just doing it on a surface level, then it makes sense why people would dismiss it, because it's not useful in a way to just know, oh, this means this and this means that. You have to go a bit deeper so as to understand the context and the different levels and everything else. So I think it is easy to dismiss something that, oh, this person is moon in Sagittarius, so they're having an emotional need to be, outgoing and philosophical. That doesn't really do much. You have to just observe it a bit more, and you have to get into it a bit more in order to get all the nuances. And you don't have to get super deep into everything in the sense that, like, you don't have to spend your life just reading about astrology to get into it. But when you allow yourself to get more in tune with certain aspects of it, then you can more easily feel confident about the fact that there is something to it, and you don't have to just dismiss it and things like that. But there will always be people that dismiss it. And so that makes me feel a certain way as well at certain times. And, I can't just discuss it with the people, or, it's something that I have to kind of it's not something that is just easy to talk about with people. It's not like doing certain things that, like, drawing or just fixing things, or like things that everybody kind of accepts. This is something that's more maybe reserved, let's say, for certain kinds of people or whatever. So it's difficult to connect with everybody in this level, and people can really just think you're ridiculous if you are interested in astrology. And, another thing is that astrology does take a long time to learn, in the sense that, like I said, to become properly in tune with it, it can take a while. And so there can be a lot of questioning that happens. You might question, like, do I really understand this element of, the subject? Or, there is, especially like if you're a doubtful person, kind of like I am, it can be difficult to really understand sometimes, of like, well, do I understand this information? Is this really correct? And what sources do I trust? What sources do I not trust? And so I think it's important, again, to find sources that you resonate with. And astrology, I think, a lot of times is about resonance, like what feels right to me and what resonates with me. And, another thing is, again, this comes down to like what resonates with you as someone who's doing astrology, is that my last point actually is that there can be so much confusion around things like house systems, orbs, out of sign aspects, and minor aspects, right? So let's break this down a little bit. So with house systems, that is actually something that I still haven't fully found my footing in, if that makes any sense. So like I still haven't fully I have a house system that I use more than others, but I haven't found exactly an integral reason why I would use this house system. I just kind of use it because it seems to kind of make sense to me, but it's not that I have this big, deep, integral reason, and I would never, look at any other house system. There's certain house systems that I might look at sometimes when it comes to transits that I wouldn't necessarily look at in terms of natal charts. But I can't, again, it's difficult to reason why I would use this house system over others. It's just something that I had to choose, and it's just something that I kind of fell into. But I feel like there are astrologers out there, professional astrologers, who have a very clear idea of why they want to use the house system that they use, and they have seen with their own, intuition and their own eyes, like why this house system works for them. And they don't have to just kind of fall into it, because they know, like they can feel why they would use this house system over others. They can see it in practice that this works for them, and the way that they work with astrology, that this house system is the best for them. Orbs. So again, sometimes it's difficult because it's not really a clear-cut system. So some people use 10-degree orbs, some people will go 8 degrees, 5 degrees, and depends on the planets. And so sometimes it's difficult to know like what to do. Like, do I take this into account if it's like 10 degrees, let's say Sun conjunct Jupiter, but it's like 10 or 11 degrees? Do I use that or do I not use that? But then I think the key is to just look at, well, what resonates and what seems real. So if the person seems like they have Sun conjunct Jupiter, well, then you can probably use that in an interpretation. If they don't really seem like they have Sun conjunct Jupiter, it doesn't seem like a strong force in their life, let's say force, whatever. Like if they don't really seem to have Sun conjunct Jupiter, well, then maybe don't look at it. But it can be difficult because it's not a clear-cut system. And you have to use your own kind of intuition. You have to use your own experience. You have to use your own knowledge. You have to use your own ideas of like what makes sense. It's kind of personal to every astrologer, I think. So it's not like it's somebody tells you that like, these are the orbs that you have to use. And so you have to kind of use your own mind to kind of figure these things out and see like what works. And if you're learning astrology and you're just kind of a beginner, it can be hard to like trust yourself. Like I've learned astrology for a while, many years, but I still find it hard to trust myself sometimes when it comes to like, well, do I take this into account? Do I not take this into account? I'm kind of like unsure about certain things about it. So it can be difficult to know sometimes, like, do I take this into account or not when it comes to, let's say, orbs. There's also out of sign aspects. People disagree on that. Personally, I have found that I do like to use out of sign aspects. So let's say the moon is in like at 28 degrees of Taurus, and let's say Jupiter is at let's say like 1 degree of Sagittarius. So like I would use that as an opposition. I would count that as an opposition, especially if it seems like the person is in a natal chart, like if the person is embodying that in some way. There might be some times where a minor aspect, an out of sign aspect doesn't really seem to match what the person is dealing with psychologically or in their life or whatever. So then you don't have to count it. And I think out of sign aspects, they can, in some sense, maybe be just weaker, or you might need to interpret them differently. So that's again something that you kind of have to look at yourself, and you have to kind of use your own mind to kind of figure out, like, does this resonate with what this person is doing on this earth, let's say. And then minor aspects are difficult to sometimes consider as well, but I've kind of made my own decision about them in a certain sense, in that I do like to use quincunxes or inconjuncts. I like to call it quincunx just because inconjunct sounds like in a conjunction with, and it's not a conjunction, it's an inconjunction or a quincunx. So I like to say quincunx instead. It just makes it clearer. And then I do like to use quintiles and biquintiles because I have them in my chart. I have several quintiles and biquintiles, and I kind of understand what a quintile is more than some of the other aspects, some of the other minor aspects. Like I never really consider, this is going kind of off topic now, but I don't really consider like certain minor aspects. Like I don't really look at semi-squares that much, although I can think of it as like a minor square, but I don't really look at them. Or I don't really look at, let's say, semi-sextiles and things like that. But again, when you're learning astrology, it can just be difficult to kind of wrap your head around these things. And that's one of the things that I don't like, is that, it is difficult to kind of, especially if you're learning still and you're trying to like, you're enthusiastic and you're trying to like get your head around it, but it can just take a while to figure out like what you believe and what you resonate with. Sometimes it can be difficult, I think, because there's so many different options. Like, do I take this into account? Do I take that into account? So I think the key just is to see like what is relevant, what seems relevant for this person. So I'm going to leave it at that. So it's just some of the things that I find challenging, or that some people might find challenging or more difficult about astrology. And I'm sure there's other things, but I just wanted to make a video discussing some of these things. So if you want more from me, do subscribe, leave a comment if you have any thoughts about this, and leave a thumbs up if you like this. So thank you for watching.